Just because she's a head wrap auntie don't mean that she has progressive politics. Doesn't mean that she's not an agent of patriarchy. Does not mean that she's not an agent of white supremacy. Like, it don't mean that. It just means that she puts a scarf on her head and don't show her titties. That's all I mean. So there's all these rap beats going on. Chris Brown released something to come at Quavo. I had no idea Quavo and Chris Brown had beef. I also don't really be following what men do. That's men's business. I stay out of men's business. He released a track talking about Quavo. As far as rap is concerned, it's not a good diss track. So yeah, so Jill Scott tweeted this randomly out of the blue, and she says, Chris Brown is amazing. How does anybody sing like that? Dance, look, act, and rap like that. Beyond gifted. It appears exceptional. People have to go through exceptional fire. There's nothing to debate. And then someone said to her, I think women he's abused would disagree. Which, that's how I feel about it. That's how I feel about exceptional. And then Jill Scott goes on to say, this is the most ridiculous thing I've heard in a long time. And believe me, I hear a lot of ridiculous things. She says, I doubt it. My mother's ex-husband was a mean, violent human. And he could lay foundation better than anyone in my city. What he did with cement was awe-inspiring. We got away. He got a raise and praise for his ability. God dealt with the rest. Now that has got to be the most ridiculous thing I've read in a long time. One of the most ridiculous things I've heard in such a long time. Because first of all, what? He laid bricks, so that excuses all the harm he made, and then you left it up to God to fix the rest. What? So now I want to say that I'm not surprised Jill Scott said this. To me, this is on trend for Jill Scott. Stuff like this is on trend for Erica Badu. I know some years ago she was dragged on Twitter because she was saying that little girls should make sure that they dress appropriately because men, I'm paraphrasing because this is from memory, but men naturally are sexual. So little girls should do these things to make sure men don't be predators to them or whatever the fuck. Yeah, she said that. I know NDRE said something over like last summer. This is from memory also, but in reaction to Megan Thee Stallion's performance, um, about how harmful the sexualization of women are and da 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 da. And every time these women drop statements like this, people on the internet is surprised, and I don't quite understand why, because it's very on trend for them. It's very on trend to me, and maybe this is because I grew up in this world. I was raised in the Nation of Islam. I was raised around fucking, um, you know, what people call hoteps now. I was raised around respectability politics that didn't look like church, but looked like something very tied to Pan Africanism. I've seen that stuff my whole life, and I've heard those types of things from women who look like that my whole life, and that is why I have done everything in my power to not look like that. It's very on trend for those kinds of women to be very close in respectability politics, and also to be very, very tied to patriarchy and thinking that the way to navigate patriarchy is to abide by the rules of it. Honestly, I personally do not think it is a generational thing. I did see a lot of people say this online, and everyone's experience is different. I don't think it's a generational thing because I have seen younger people say stuff like this. There's a whole weirdo trade wife, whatever y'all call them, trade wife, trad wife, whatever the fuck, a whole movement of this very patriarchal, respectable woman thing that's happening even with younger people. So they may not sound as ridiculous as Jill Scott, Their language might not be like Jill Scott, but I don't think this is something that is tied to a generation. I think it's tied to patriarchy and women trying to figure out, regardless of age, figuring out navigating patriarchy. Some of us have decided to do things to dismantle it. Some of us have decided to try to remove ourselves out of that system as much as we can. And some of us, regardless of age, have decided that this system actually works and let me abide by it. And that's what they're doing. We see it with, but there are people our age who are fine with Tory Lanez, even though he is convicted of shooting her. So that's why I don't think this is something generational. I think this is something that is the system of patriarchy, regardless of age. I don't think it's a Gen X thing. There are things that are Gen X things. There are things that are older millennial things, but for me, I feel like this is actually just patriarchy doing the things that patriarchy does. I don't think it is just a Gen X thing. The other thing I wanted to say is I think another reason why the expectation, or not an expectation, another reason why people are so surprised when Jill Scott or Erykah Badu say something really, really harmful like this is because of who we decided they are, because of how they dress and because of the way they present themselves. So because they wear head wraps, because they wear, I don't know, clothes that cover their body, because they, I don't know, speak like they're at a poetry slam, because they fucking drink tea and wear big hats and look eclectic and talk about chakras and are into astrology, that these bitches must have an elevated train of thought. But I don't mean that at all. Just because you acknowledge that an altar exists or a higher power, whatever the fuck, for some reason, when we put women in that box, black women in particular, we are surprised when they say things that is very indicative of the world we live in. Whoever you've decided that they are, these spiritual conduits, you assign that to them because based on media, we've decided that those women are special women and that they probably don't do or say things that are harmful, but that is far from the truth. We do that. So I think it is important for us to expand our minds on where harm can come from. Harm can come from people that look like that. And I think that because we have been socialized and brainwashed to think that harm from a black woman looks like something very specific. So maybe she's ghetto, maybe she's loud, maybe she's an addict. The list goes on. And we are rejecting the fact that harm can come from anybody. And harm can come from a person who looks like those people. And when we do that, when we put them in a box like that, and we treat them a certain way because of that, we do the community a disservice. We do the community a disservice. Just because she's a head wrap auntie, don't mean that she has progressive politics. Doesn't mean that she's not an agent of patriarchy. Does not mean that she's not an agent of white supremacy. Like, it don't mean that. It just means that she puts a scarf on her head and don't show her titties. That's all I mean.